I didn't get it. Then I realised later it was a nudist beach.
Yes. Yes.
Well, I've never been to a nudist beach for fear that someone will roll me into the sea and try and refloat me.
Oh,
Neil, come on.
No, but see, okay, so that's the thing that I really like about the topless beach that I spent some time on, is that everybody's body becomes acceptable and
chic.
accepted. No, it's not chic. It's just
Right.
normal, and you stop worrying about what anybody looks like, and you become unaware of what you look like because you're just there for a swim and a sit in the sun. And also on the Mediterranean beaches, they sell cocktails at the waterline. So
It's a very different scene, though, isn't
so
it? Saint-Tropez or Portugal is a very
sophisticated.
It's.
But I genuinely think you stop worrying about what you look like, and you feel less anxious about yourself and other people.
All right. Right now, an Auckland girl left in tears after her usual this is a crazy story. Very interesting, though. Usual hairdresser refuses to cut her hair. But it's actually quite interesting. This hairdresser, Bogart's Styling Lounge in Pokakoi, Bogart Styling Lounge, has a new policy where they won't cut kids' hair unless a parent goes there too. So this is because many parents take their kids to the cheapo suburban hairdresser for a $15 cut, but won't get their own hair cut there. Oh no, they take themselves to the fancy one in the city for a $200 cut. Neil, what do you make of this? Little Shelby was left in tears because the policy dictated that the $25 cut that she used to have, she can't have now unless her mother gets her hair cut there as well. What is going on at Bogart's?
Oh, I think it's completely ridiculous, and I think there should be a policy like there is in taxis that that you have to take the fare even if you think it's too short or a waste of your time. If that's the price and the kid's a kid, then you should do it. What I want to see is the hairdresser who reduced this poor girl to tears drive into a petrol station, say, fill her up, and they go, sorry, can't give you any petrol because you don't use our mechanic. And because it's that kind of level. And it's like, it's crazy.
It is, isn't it? Because the mother in this story sounds lovely, can't afford to go to that salon herself.
Or any salon. She gets it cut from a friend.
One of her mates. And so she wanted to do a special treat for her daughter by taking her to the fancy salon that she can't afford to go to herself.
What do you think's the rationale behind the policy? What might it be?
I don't really understand it. They can't be bothered cutting kids'
It'll
hair.
be a return. So basically, the money they will get a lot more money for the same amount of time if they were only cutting long adult female hair.
A grown-up person's hair. I also don't understand why it costs more to cut female hair than male hair. Why is that?
That's a very good question.
I just get my fringe trimmed and the bottom of my hair cut off. My husband doesn't have a fringe, so his is quicker, but it's the same work. Why does mine cost 3 times as much as his?
Different techniques to layer?
No, I don't.
You layer. Your hair looks a lot more layered than mine.
Oh, I don't know that it is. And straight hair is easier to cut than your curly hair, so there's probably less skill required. Yeah, I think so. I don't know.
And I've got a mullet, so
so
my opinions on hairdressing are not valid.
You are sounding more and more attractive on the radio today.
You sound like you have a mullet, Neil, to be quite frank with you.
As people have told me I have a face and body for radio.
My producer says a beached whale mullet. Just being silly. Neil, you have a wonderful afternoon.
You too, thank you.
And Michelle, it's great to have you on the show as well.
Wallace,
I'm Wallace Chapman, and I am back with you Monday afternoon. See you then.
Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's program, just a hand, secondary teachers vote to strike. What's happening with Auckland City Rail Link after the parent company of one of the key contractors on the multi-billion-dollar project goes, well, off the rails? We'll have the latest. Should Christchurch blow the full-time whistle on sideline boozing at 20 council parks following complaints of messy and dangerous alcohol-fuelled behaviour? Our intrepid South Island reporter hitches a lift into the flood-soaked Otago town of Henley. And it's crunch time for the teachers, as mentioned. The first passenger train since the Kaikoura quake arrives in Christchurch from Picton. But first, the news.
RNZ News at 5. No mai, haere mai. Good afternoon, I'm Paul Brennan. Secondary teachers have voted to take strike action next year. Over the past weeks, Post-Primary Teachers Association members have been voting on whether to accept or reject the government's pay offer. The union was asking for a single increase of 15%, and the government offered its members a 3% pay increase for 3 consecutive years. Primary teachers have been holding rolling strikes this year after rejecting a similar offer. The Minister of Transport, Phil Twyford, has ordered the Ministry of Transport to review NZTA's performance of their regulatory functions. The review comes after the Transport Agency apologised for failing to enforce safety rules in many inspection areas, including warrants of fitness for cars. Phil Twyford says he's been seriously concerned about the scope and seriousness of the failures that have occurred. He says there are a number of issues that need to be addressed to provide assurance to him and the public that deficiencies around NZTA's regulatory performance are identified and addressed. The review is due to be completed by the end of March next year. Vaping is to be banned in bars, restaurants and workplaces. The Associate Health Minister Jenny Salesa says a law change next year will also make vaping products subject to the same retail advertising restrictions as tobacco products. She says vaping is a significantly less harmful alternative to smoking and has been used as an effective tool to quit smoking. But because it's not completely risk-free, the government wants to protect young people from taking it up as well as those exposed to it.
We want to see smokers switching to vaping, but we do not want to see non-smokers and young people taking up vaping. The proposals will provide clarification in the legislation. It will clarify that all vaping liquid, not just liquid containing nicotine, is covered by the Smoke-Free Environments Act.
Jenny Salesa. The family of Hawke's Bay man Kelly Donner, who was stabbed to death by a 14-year-old boy, says the murder conviction is a good result. After a 5-day trial at the High Court in Napier, a jury has found Hami Hanara guilty of murdering Mr Donner. Speaking outside the court after the verdict, Mr Donner's cousin Damon Donner said it had been a hard 8 months, but their family now had closure.
At the end of the day, no matter what the sentence, can't bring our cousin back, and it's good that it's been foreclosed and the family can move forward.
Damon Donner says he would like his cousin Kelly to be remembered as a good man. Local iwi have blessed the isolated Wairarapa beach where the body of a pregnant Wellington woman was found and put a rahui on the area until next Friday. Solemn Scheller, who was 5 months pregnant, went missing from her home in the suburb of Kandala on Saturday. Her body was found by a group of surfers on Wednesday at White Rock Beach, about 35 kilometres from Martinborough. The manager of nearby White Rock Farm, David Mills, and his staff helped police get their gear to the scene.
They had to use our phone because there's no cell phone coverage anywhere along the coast here, and so they just used this house here as a base really to just communicate with the other police and whatever they had to do.
David Mills from White Rock Farm. Meanwhile, the police are awaiting forensic analysis of the post-mortem to confirm Mrs Scholler's cause of death. The police are at the scene of a fatal crash in Northland involving a prison van and a car on State Highway 1 south of Wailmeo. They say one person travelling in the car has been killed and one in the van has moderate injuries. The van was transporting prisoners who have since been moved to another van. The police say motorists heading north should take the Mangakahia Road, although light vehicles can also use Ruapekapeka Road detour. While most of Otago has begun to clean up after torrential rain on Tuesday led to floods this week, the residents of Henley are still waiting for the water to recede. The Dunedin City Council cannot say when it expects roads to the area to reopen. Access is still limited to those with four-wheel drives. Farmer Josh Adams says luckily his house is not flooded.
It's about 10 centimetres from going in, so last year, July, we had it come in, well, about an inch to come in. But this time it hasn't come in, so it's quite good. But the wool shed, it's gone about half a foot through the wool shed.
Josh Adams says he returned to his home on Wednesday. He says his stock are fine, but most of his dairy farm on the other side of State Highway 1 to Henley is also underwater. It may be a difficult time for Tairi farmers if the water does not subside soon. The government has announced it will invest $40 million to put 2 new carriages on the newly reopened Coastal Pacific Rail line. One carriage will hold 63 passengers to meet peak season demand, while the other will be a luxury premium carriage equipped with high-quality food and drink. Some of the money will also go toward marketing the service, which will now run all year long. The Kaikoura Mayor, Winston Gray, says the town thrives on tourism brought in by the rail line and says having the added carriages will be a huge economic boost.
That train's going to run, 12 months of the year. They made that announcement today, so that is good. A lot of people get off that train, stay the night, and they sort of stay a night and get back on and things like that. So it's just another boost for our tourism. Tourism drives our economy here now. It's a big part, very big part of our economy. We've got farming and fishing, etc., but tourism is a big part of the economy.
The Kaikoura Mayor, Winston Gray. It's 5 minutes past 5. On to sport now. The New Zealand driver Scott McLaughlin hasn't touched the Supercars trophy and doesn't intend to until he wins it. McLaughlin goes into this weekend's final round in Newcastle with a slender 14-point lead over fellow New Zealander Shane van Gisbergen. The 25-year-old Ford driver was involved in photo shoots with the trophy this week, but he made sure he made no contact with the silverware.
I don't touch any of the trophies that I haven't won, so it's just a superstition thing. Richie McCaw used to do it with the Rugby World Cup, so until he won it, he touched it after that. So yeah, I'll go with what he went pretty well after that.
Scott McLaughlin. Teenager Nico Jones, the son of All Blacks great Michael Jones, has committed to playing his provincial rugby for Auckland for the next 2 years. However, his focus remains on sevens. Earlier this month, Jones signed a sevens contract with New Zealand Rugby and is now part of the All Blacks sevens squad competing in the World Series. Jones led St Peter's College to the national first 15 title this year and also played for the New Zealand schools side. Several provincial unions were chasing him before Auckland won out, but sevens will take priority.
Sevens is a great sport and it's an amazing environment, but also because I think that will also be the best place to develop my 15s game too. So I'll be under great coaches and I'll be learning still how to tackle, how to pass, whatever it is. And if I can transfer that to 15s, I think it'll be the best place for me.
Nico Jones, that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Elbow is the Friday night live act. Something for the weekend is Rail X, it's a model rail thing. Country Life brews up a storm, and because Dr. Who debuted on this day in 1963, we have a Sonic Tonic dedicated to science fiction. That's Nights with me, Brian Crump, from Afternoon News at 7 on RNZ National.
Now we have the short forecast from Met Service through to midnight tomorrow, Saturday. For Northland, rain gradually spreading south today. Heavy falls and possible thunderstorms tomorrow. Auckland to Kapiti, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country, mainly fine today. Rain at times tomorrow, possible heavy falls from Waitomo and Taupo northwards. For Gisborne to Wairarapa, also Wellington, cloudy periods and a few showers turning to rain for a time later tomorrow. For Gisborne to Wairarapa, and I think I might have done that one. Marlborough, Canterbury and North Otago, often cloudy with patchy drizzle turning to rain tomorrow. For the rest of the South Island, fine today, apart from isolated afternoon and evening showers about the ranges. Early fog in Southland tomorrow, otherwise occasional rain developing during the day. And the Chathams, cloudy today, occasional rain tomorrow. It is 8 minutes past 5.
And you're listening to Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. Officials are scrambling to determine how Auckland's massive rail project will cope after the parent firm of one of its contractors collapsed. RCR Infrastructure New Zealand was jointly awarded one of 7 contracts for the $3.4 billion City Rail link 6 weeks ago. But last night, its Australian parent company, RCR Tomlinson, went into administration. Annika Smith has more.
News of the collapse of the Perth-based company has shocked Australia's construction industry as administrators work on salvaging viable parts of the business. ABC Perth correspondent Catherine Diss says it affects the company's 3,400-strong workforce, while hundreds of subcontractors working at sites around Australia have been left in limbo.
A subcontractor I spoke to this morning who's working on one of their northwest projects, so in Western Australia's northwest on a lithium project, has told me that they're entering a meeting to try and figure out where to go to from here, so to speak. They did all the civil contracting work on that project, but my understanding is they haven't yet been paid.
Along with the Auckland City Rail link, the company lists its current projects as the Melbourne Underground Rail Loop upgrade, property maintenance for big public hospitals in Melbourne, and a capital works program for Melbourne's water and sewerage system. Catherine Diss says its problems began when it became involved in solar farms across Western Australia, Queensland and Victoria.
Only most recently did they enter the space into solar contracting, so they shifted away, I suppose, from their their main core business of mining and resources sort of contracts and moved into the solar farm space, and that's where it appears they've come a bit undone.
Across the ditch, it's unknown just how far the damage will spread, but urgent talks are underway today between City Rail Link, RCR, Opus and the administrator. The company's New Zealand arm is still trading and work on the City Rail Link continues. In an interview with RNZ yesterday, head of City Rail Link Sean Sweeney raised RCR Tomlinson as the front-runner for the railway contract and didn't flag any concern over its finances. But today he said he's been questioning its chief executive for weeks after the company stopped trading in Australia.
Hindsight's a wonderful thing, and on a project the size of City Rail Link, we are going to hit the odd speed bump. Naturally, looking back, you could say, with what we now know, would we have done the same thing? That's a good question, but it doesn't change what we've got to deal with right now.
Mr Sweeney, who was meeting with the receivers this afternoon, says RCR is currently doing design work for the rail project, but its future with City Rail Link is not clear. Paul Miller is chair of the public transport lobby group New Zealand Transport 2050. He says it's a worrying development.
I was pretty disappointed, but it's unfortunately part of the industry at the moment in both countries. There's potential risk impacting the project itself. They did mention, of course, that the New Zealand business unit was separate. It's hard to know when they say it's separate, is it actually a profitable business unit?
Infrastructure New Zealand Chief Executive Stephen Selwood says it will likely have minimal impact on the project.
The New Zealand arm of RCR has been a viable company, and provided all parties operating on a business as usual basis, I see no reason why this couldn't be successfully transitioned either to a new owner or operated through under administration.
Aucklanders say any delay on the major project would be annoying, but it's nothing they're not already living with.
I think as the population grows in Auckland, more and more needs to be done. When there's delays for transport, it's really inconvenient and it costs taxpayers and ratepayers a lot of money.
They've ripped up half of Auckland CBD. They'll have to get someone else in to do it. It'll cause delays. But the end result at that point when it's open will be great, and then it'll be the next disruption.
For now, the impact of this disruption is not clear, but work continues to get the country's biggest project running by 2024. The Minister for Transport, Phil Twyford, and Auckland Mayor Phil Goff say they're keeping a close eye on the situation, but both refuse to be interviewed or appear on Checkpoint tonight. Mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Annika Smith aho.
Meanwhile, the Minister of Transport, Phil Twyford, this afternoon ordered the Ministry of Transport to review NZTA's performance of their regulatory functions. It comes after the Transport Agency apologised for failing to enforce safety rules in many inspection areas, including warrants of fitness for cars. Mr Twyford says he's been seriously concerned about failures that have occurred, but he has refused multiple requests to appear on Checkpoint over the past 2 days. The Associate Transport Minister, Shane Jones, has also declined to be interview. Checkpoint has repeatedly asked NZTA to come on the show to address a number of unanswered questions. They've declined that invitation and then stopped answering our emails. They have identified 150 priority cases but are refusing to release any information to us on whether there are any other warrant issuers who are under scrutiny and to disclose who those are. They say they will provide some details next week. We're going to put up online so you can see some of our correspondence with NZTA and some of the reasons they say they can't provide us with that information. That'll be up there later this evening. Secondary school teachers have voted to strike next year. PPTA members around the country have been voting on the government's latest pay offer. The final count was tallied this afternoon after the Wellington and West Coast branches respectively cast their votes. Emma Hatton filed this report.
Kapiti College. Mana College. Newlands College.
A roll call, but this was no ordinary assembly. 1,200 Post-Primary Teachers Association members gathered at the Porirua Event Centre today for a paid union meeting to be briefed on the government's latest offer. And they didn't sound impressed. Anna Greeny, a science and chemistry teacher at Aotea College, says the revised offer was pitiful. She teaches 2 classes of 30 students each and says that's too big.
In a practical science subject, that's not okay. It's about not having enough equipment,
and having eyes on 30 kids doing 30 different experiments all at the same time. It's not practically health and safety, it's got to be an issue.
Jordan Murray, an English and Media Studies teacher, says the offer was a joke.
Yeah, it felt like a bit of a laugh in the face, to be honest. It didn't feel super serious to me. I'm not very stoked with it. Seems like, yeah, they've not addressing like the things that we value as important. So that class size stuff, the time that we need to be able to do our job properly. You know, we can get paid as much as they want to give us, but if we're not don't have the time, we can't do the job properly in the first place.
The Ministry of Education made its initial pay offer to the PPTA in late September. A new offer was made in November, but it was slammed as being almost identical to the first. The latest offer is worth just over $400 million over 4 years and would see all trained secondary teachers' base salaries increase by 3% each year for 3 years. The PPTA President, Jack Boyle, says it's a moral failure and recommended that members vote against it. The Wellington Regional Union Chair, Ahmed Osama, agreed, but didn't want to preempt the vote.
Along with you, I'll find out today, and I'll find out from my members from the Wellington region today, although I can tell you within the Wellington region, I know that the current offer does not sound like will meet the issues that we're facing. For example, we've got shortages of teachers, we've got classes that have big class sizes, we do not have enough relievers in the relief pool, and there are many other issues that we are trying to deal with.
Kapiti College Te Reo Māori teacher Paula Trim is hoping this time next year all teachers might be breathing a little easier.
I'd like to see teachers less stressed out. Teachers are less stressed out, then the kids will be less stressed out as well. It's all about allowing us to do our jobs properly. We're all passionate about what we do, but you only have to take a look around to see that teachers of secondary school are pretty strung out.
The Primary Teachers Union, the NZEI, also attended the Porirua meeting, having just finished rolling strike action across the country last week. In Wellington for Checkpoint, Emma Hatton.
The police are appealing for the public's help for more clues as to how the body of a pregnant Wellington woman ended up on a remote Wairarapa beach. They're asking for any CCTV footage from the Wellington suburb of Kandala, where Sonam Shalar lived, and to look out for anything that she might have been wearing or carrying at the time she went missing. The police say they're determined to give the family the answers they need. Laura Dooney has been to the remote Wairarapa beach where her body was found on Wednesday.
Local iwi have been to Bless where Mrs Shalar's body was found and have placed a rahui on the area until next Friday. It's a remote beach, rocky and rugged, south of White Rock Beach. Meanwhile, the police are asking the public to help. Detective Senior Sergeant Warwick McKee, who's leading the inquiry, says they've been given CCTV footage from businesses and local residents, but they need more.
I just want to appeal to the public again and ask for them to contact us if they've got any CCTV footage, potentially of the roads, streets, particularly in Kandala and around Island Bay.
The police are also looking for more of Mrs Shalar's personal belongings after 2 cell phones were found at a Wellington beach. They're being examined by police to try to find out more about the events leading to her death. Warwick McKee says the find of the phones on Saturday was just a chance.
Couple of young chaps that were at the beach on Saturday found the items, the 2 cell phones in the water. We're working through forensic analysis on those cell phones to determine polling and call data.
The isolated beach where Mrs Shalar's body was discovered is just a few kilometres away from White Rock Station. The manager of the farm, David Mills, says he was working in the cattle yards when surfers approached him.
And they just said to me that they found a body on the beach and what should they do because there's no cell phone coverage. So I said to one of my shepherds, you go and make them a cup of tea and I'll go and ring the police. I rang the police and they responded straight away and arrived out here.
He says he's been helping the police while they searched the area where Mrs Shalar's body was found.
The first day we did help them get the gear they needed to secure the scene and things like that. Help them get their gear around there on a 4-wheelers because it was quite a remote spot where she was, and then just they had to use our phone because there's no cell phone coverage anywhere along the coast here, and so they just used this house here as a base really to just communicate with the other police and whatever they had to do.
The police have also been canvassing the leafy suburb of Kandala, where she lived with her husband and flatmates. The news has shocked the residents of this well-heeled Wellington suburb.
Oh, it's terrible. It's really, really sad. And really feel for all that are involved and just really feel for the family.
a sentiment echoed by another Kandala resident, Sandy, who's now worried about her own security.
Those sort of things don't happen in Kandala. From my point of view, I'm concerned, being a female living very close to where it happened, to know what did happen. Am I safe? You know. Yeah, pregnant mum, that makes it even more tragic, really. But I would definitely like to know the outcome of what did happen, just so that we know, well, I don't know whether there's somebody in the neighbourhood or preying on people or doing whatever.
A post-mortem on Mrs Sheila's body has been done, and police are awaiting forensic analysis to confirm the cause of her death. In Martinborough for Checkpoint, call Laura Dooney aho.
The government plans to stub out vaping in bars and restaurants and restrict the sale of e-cigarettes in the same way as tobacco. It is all part of the plan to make New Zealand smoke-free by 2025 and is addressing concerns that too many young people are attracted to the flavours and smells of vaping. However, the government's own medical advice says the majority of people using e-cigarettes are tobacco smokers trying to give up, and there's equal concerns that the new rules might turn them off. Alex Perrottet reports.
New Zealand's smoking rate is dropping steadily, but the Associate Health Minister Jenny Salisa says 5,000 smoking-related deaths a year is too much, as the ambitious target of smoke-free 2025 looms. Ms Salisa says the government acknowledges vaping is far less harmful than tobacco, but there are still risks that justify the new clampdown.
We want to see smokers switching to vaping, but we do not want to see non-smokers and young people taking up vaping.
Jonathan Rennie from the Hemp Store, which sells hemp products, herbal highs and smokers' supplies, says it's a good move.
On scientific balance of probability, they are healthier than smoking. We still could do with a bit more information, and so I think this cautious approach of bringing vaping under the Smoke-Free Environments Act is wise.
However, Jonathan Rennie says the law should have an inbuilt review process in the event that future research shows vaping to be safe. Professor Hayden McRobbie, a leading international expert who advises the Ministry of Health, says because we don't know yet of any long-term health risks posed by vaping, it's a measured approach. He says the proposal would do away with some flavours that might be more enticing for children.
I don't think vapers are going to be deprived of their favourite flavours, but of course as time goes on we'll know more with what flavours do.
But these vapers on the streets of Auckland had mixed views about the looming ban.
I can tell you for a fact that even when the packaging says it's like candy floss flavour, it does not taste like candy floss, so I don't think I don't think that's going to work.
Draconian. I think they'll be more harmful to people that are current smokers. I don't think that vaping is attractive to children other than what the liquids smell like.
And this bar manager says people will just adapt.
Kind of already affected us with the smoking, but still we're busy, like people still want their drink. Do you know what I mean? Like where we are, we're just on the street, so you just have to 2 feet across and you can smoke, so it's not that much of an inconvenience. People have got used to it.
The General Manager of National Tobacco Control Advocacy, Mihi Blair, welcomes the news and agrees with the move towards plain packaging and tighter rules around naming. She also says the restriction on flavours is a good idea, but there's a fine balance between discouraging children and attracting adult smokers.
Over in America, FDA just reduced a lot of the flavours, so to become less appealing for the young people. We understand that, we definitely need that, but then on the other hand, we have 166,000 Māori people, which is 33% of our population group, smoking, and so we want to give them a bit more opportunity to have the choice.
Murray Lorgerson is an emeritus professor at the University of Canterbury and was the architect of the Smoke-Free Environments Act back in 1990. He says smoking has killed too many people and people need to either give up or move to vaping. But he says most people don't know about vaping, and if the government is going to bring in the restrictions, it should also do more to promote vaping to smokers.
A lot of people don't know about vaping, and the further south you go, the less people know. And so an extensive campaign to inform people would be a very good start. And putting information in front of people will help them to make up their minds.
Jenny Salisa says she's not looked at subsidising vaping as a way to help smokers to give up, but will ask the Ministry for advice. She says there will be a public consultation process and she hopes the law change will be introduced to Parliament late next year. For Checkpoint, Alex Perrottet.
The first passenger train from Picton to Christchurch since the devastating Kaikoura earthquake has just arrived in the Garden City. The 7.8 Kaikoura quake ripped up the scenic coastal Pacific Railway as kilometres of tracks were swept out to sea or buried under slips. The rebuild of the railway line has taken 2 years and the efforts of nearly 1,700 workers, some of whom were on the train. And adding to the cheer, the government announced it will spend $40 million putting new 2 carriages onto the line. Kathy Templeman has just driven the train into Christchurch and joins us now on the phone. Hi, Kathy.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
What was the drive like? Because I understood you drove from Kaikoura to Christchurch. How was it?
I was actually a passenger on the train coming in this time. We handed the driving over to somebody else, and I had the opportunity of sitting in the carriages and talking with everybody as we arrived into Christchurch.
So how was that experience? You know, the track's been out of commission for the last couple of years. You're cruising along there. Paint us a picture. What was it like?
It was incredible. In fact, it's so surreal. We still can hardly believe that this train was running on the lines. It was very emotional for everybody. As we left Kaikoura, there were, staff and many workers on the train. And obviously people were actually tearing up. It was just so emotional, waving to people. It was beyond description, to be fair.
Why do you think you felt so emotional?
For the majority of us, especially as the drivers, we just didn't believe that this passenger train would ever be able to run again in Kaikoura. We didn't expect that there'd be any trains. The devastation of the damage from the earthquake was just so big. We just never thought that this day would arrive.
And as you say, you had some workers on board. So these are the people who have spent the last couple of years of their life making this track a reality, fixing it. So what was it like for them? Did you chat to them along the way?
Oh, we did. We chatted constantly, and they were in awe of it as well. I mean, so many of them had taken part and worked tirelessly, 24/7, literally, to get this train where it is today. And it was overwhelming for everybody. It's been a very long day, and I can tell you there's going to be a lot of celebrating tonight.
Kathy, will you drive that line at some point? Is that a route that you would drive along?
Yes, in fact, just before the earthquake, I drove it for several days prior, and I'm looking forward to it. Next Tuesday, I'm going to be back behind the controls, and I'll be taking it up to Kaikoura myself. I'm very excited, I can assure you.
So that Tuesday will be your first time behind the controls since that track has been fixed?
Absolutely, yep, and I can't wait.
That's pretty awesome, really, isn't it?
It is. It's very huge. I mean, for all us locomotive engineers, I mean, we drive trains because we love trains, and especially the coastal Pacific. It's one of our favourite lines. It's one of our favourite trains, and it's certainly been missed.
So, what is it? Just the scenic nature of it? Why is it one of your favourites?
It is the scenery, and it's the line itself, the gradient of it. We get to really drive a train, and it's the pleasure of taking the passengers. You come out through Claverley, and then suddenly, you see the ocean. Quite often in the mornings, especially, you'll get dolphins swimming. You see all sorts. It's just a huge buzz, and you'll see the passengers will be racing out to the viewing platform and taking photos. And of course, we just all, we thrive on that. We love to see them enjoying themselves on the train.
So was it a smooth ride today? What did you make of the new rail line there?
Oh, it's brilliant. It's lovely. It's smooth. It's it's the best it's ever been, and people really need to get on and experience it because they're going to absolutely love it.
And now that you've encouraged all these people who are going to be thinking, hey, that's something I might want to do. It's every day, isn't it, from now on? What's the deal?
Every day, every morning. The Coastal Pacific will leave. It departs 7 o'clock in the morning, and every single day, and we'll get you back. It'll go straight through to Picton, and we'll get you back into Christchurch. If you want to come from the other direction, we'll get you back in here by 8:30 in the evening. So
a big deal for the community, because this is a lot of tourist dollars, isn't it?
Oh, it's massive. It's massive. It's been missed, badly missed, and it's absolutely needed. I mean, so many people had to give up their jobs, because this train stopped, and it's just great to see. And now, of course, we're coming back with a vengeance, and we're going to be travelling every day, and we're not going to stop.
Kathy, thanks for joining us this afternoon. That is Kathy Templeman, who is a driver on that train. She was a passenger today, but she'll be driving that route down the Kaikoura coast next Tuesday. She can't wait to get behind the controls. The torrential rain that inundated Otago earlier this week has been replaced by sunshine today, but the small town of Henley is still cut off. There are 3 roads into Henley, and unless you have a 4-wheel drive or gills, none of them have been able to be crossed since the Taieri River broke its banks on Tuesday. Our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown managed to hitch a ride on a local farmer's 4-wheel drive to get in and meet with residents who were taking their newfound isolation in their stride.
Driving along Henley Road brings into stark focus just how bad Otago's floods have been this week. Police door-knocked residents on Tuesday to tell them to get out while they could.
We got out just in case it went into the house, just to so we didn't have to, get out in a boat or whatever. So we got out before it actually happened.
And so what time was that?
We got out we went out at lunchtime after we moved all our stock off the flat and got everything into high ground, and then we thought we'd just go up and call it a day.
That's farmer Josh Adam, who was acting as my tour guide in the area. He says it was a dramatic sight when the water came over the spillway and into the paddocks on the Taieri Plains.
It started off with a trickle, but it got pretty quick, pretty fast. It started coming up pretty quick.
The floodwaters came close to his house, but they didn't get in. And while he needs a tractor to navigate his driveway, he returned home on Wednesday. And the house itself, how's that held up?
Good, yeah. It's about 10 centimetres from going in. So last year, July, we had it come in, about an inch to come in. But this time it hasn't come in, so it's quite good. But the wool shed, it's gone about half a foot through the wool shed.
That's right. You heard correct. The locals here went through all of this only last July. Henley sits right on the banks of the Taieri River and is part of a floodplain. Those who have been here for a long time, like Jock Hardigan, say the floods are just a part of life now. So you said 30 years you've lived here?
Oh, probably 1982, I think. 1982.
Right, okay. So how often is this? I mean, there was July last year, but...
Well, we had 2, and it's been getting more regular all the time. When I first came here, I probably lived here for a few years and didn't really notice anything, and now it just seems to be a regular occurrence. So, I mean, what causes that, I don't know, but it's the river comes up pretty quick now.
Jock Hardigan says as a result, Henley's residents are always prepared.
I just have plenty of supplies in the cupboard, and can't do much about nature, can you?
And the stoic attitude of Jock and Josh is mirrored across the settlement. If you have to hold firm for another couple of days, how well placed are you?
Pretty good, yeah, pretty good. Yeah, a few of us have got 4-wheel drives and that sort of thing, so you can get around, you can give the neighbour a ring or something like that, and you can get out and do something, so yeah, it's not too bad.
That's Marty Ware. While he's struggling with a lack of a flushing toilet and a shower, his biggest concern is, I guess you could say, hydration.
The freezer's got a bit of gear in it, so we'll be right for a while. Probably running out of beer more than anything else.
So that's going to be the first trip to town, is it? Yeah. Though everyone has a sunny disposition to match today's sunny weather, locals say there is one antagonist in this story.
It can be avoided if the council do a bit more of their work, look after their infrastructure a bit more. We're trying to deal with them and that sort of thing, but yeah, it's hard work. They say things and never deliver, so...
He's talking about the Otago Regional Council, which manages the flood protection scheme. Others in the area also want the council to take their concerns seriously. In a statement, the ORC's Science, Hazards and Engineering Director, Gavin Palmer, says the town is uniquely positioned in terms of flood hazard, outside the flood protection scheme, and has flooded 7 times in the past 14 years. He says the council has been working with Henley residents and the Dunedin City Council to mitigate the effects of flooding by clearing culverts, drains and driveway crossings. The Dunedin City Council has yet to visit residents in the area, but its welfare manager has been in regular contact. The DCC could not say when it expected roads to reopen, other than when the water recedes. In Henley, for Checkpoint, Timothy Brown.
And time now for the headlines with Paul Brennan.
Thank you, Lisa. Good afternoon. Secondary teachers have voted to strike next year. PPTA members want a 15% pay rise and have voted to reject the government's offer of 3% for 3 consecutive years. Primary teachers have been holding rolling strikes after rejecting a similar offer. The PPTA is due to resume talks next week. The Transport Minister has ordered a review of NZTA's performance of their regulatory functions. The agency has apologised for failing to enforce safety rules in many inspection areas, including warrants of fitness. Phil Twyford says he's gravely concerned about the scope and seriousness of the agency's failures. The review is to be completed by the end of March. A law change next year will ban vaping in bars, restaurants and workplaces. Will also put the same restrictions on the advertising of vaping products as cigarettes. The government says vaping is an effective tool to quit smoking and much less harmful, but it's not completely risk-free, and it doesn't want young people to take it up. The family of Kelly Donner, who was stabbed to death by a 14-year-old boy in Flaxmere in March, says the murder conviction is a good result. A jury has found Hami Hanada guilty of murdering Mr Donner after a 5-day trial at the High Court in Napier. Outside the court, Mr Donner's cousin, Damon Donner, said he would like Kelly to be remembered as a good man. Local iwi have blessed the remote Wairarapa beach where the body of a pregnant Wellington woman was found and put a rahui on the area. Sonam Scheller, who was 5 months pregnant, went missing from her Wellington home on Saturday. Surfers found her body at White Rock Beach near Martinborough on Wednesday. And the Kaikoura Mayor says new funding for the Coastal Pacific Rail Line will be a huge boost for the town. The government has announced it will invest $40 million into the newly reopened service, including 2 new carriages, one of which will be a luxury premium wagon. The train will run all year. That's the news.
Thank you. Let's turn to business now. Madison Reedy joins us in the studio. So, retirement village operator Ryman Healthcare has released its half-yearly report. Is there money in looking after old people?
There is a lot of it, Lisa. I think that we're in the wrong industry. So Ryman Healthcare is the country's largest retirement village operator, and they released their half-year result to the market today. So that's their 6 months financial season to September. So their net profit after tax was $170 million. Sounds like a lot, but it was actually down about 16%. Now that's because it lost some of the valuation gains in its properties that it gained last year. But to them, that's not kind of all the be all and end all there. Their underlying profit was actually up about 14%. So on the other side of that, actually up the same to $97 million. Now that was ahead of its own expectations and market expectations too. So now the company says we are in complete growth mode. So they have more cash in their reserves. They've got about $218 million sitting there to use. They've bought a new site in Melbourne. So they've got a few developments underway in Melbourne and Australia at the moment. They've bought a new one, and they also have plans to lodge some new building consents in New Zealand. They've got about 3 of them that they're looking to lodge.
And is the healthy outlook just simply because we're an ageing population and there are more customers, so to speak?
Exactly, and it seems that a lot of them also want to move into that aged care facility type building as well, because it's not just necessarily a retirement village, but Ryman kind of has led the front on also having aged care facilities, so that as sad as it sounds, as they kind of age, there is that hospital care for them there on the side as well.
Right, gotcha. Financial advisors, they're not going to be getting any freebie trips around the globe, no sort of tropical island holidays. What's going on there?
Well, they won't be if they're working for the company Sovereign. So Sovereign, which is the largest life insurance company in New Zealand, they came out today saying that they're axing it. So they're getting rid of that sales incentive late next year. Now, Sovereign is owned by AIA, which is a Hong Kong-based insurance firm, and they told all of their staff about that, and also their external financial advisors. They said they reacted all pretty well to it and that they're pretty encouraged by it. But it really comes as no surprise that Sovereign or any life insurance company should be doing this, given that a Financial Markets Authority report basically told them to do this and found problems with such a sales incentive back in 2016. So
these are frontline staff, are they, Madison, who sell insurance to you, me and the next person. When they meet their target, sometimes they would get exotic trips as a reward. Am I reading that right?
Yes, you are.
Okay, so scrapped, same way that the banks are being encouraged to get rid of it.
Yeah, very much so, very similar, and also the same regulators behind all of this. So obviously the theme here is to create better outcomes for customers, and with things like life insurance, I mean, some people have sold them as a necessity, and you know there are kind of sometimes some dodgy ways around that they're sold, and particularly what they found with trips, which are called soft commissions. They found that life insurers were twice as likely to claw back someone's policy and replace it again if they had a trip kind of dangling in front of them on offer.
Interesting. And what about the markets today?
The NZX Top 50 Index closed up just 0.02% tonight, so that's just 2 points to close at 8,719. The New Zealand dollar's buying at 68 US cents, 93.8 to the Australian and 52.8 British pence.
Thank you. That is Madison Reedy with our business update. A 14-year-old boy from Hawke's Bay is now a convicted killer. Hami Hanara was today found guilty of murdering 40-year-old Kelly Donna after stabbing him 4 times during a fight over a torch. And the teenager's family says Mr Donna's death is a tragedy for both families. Our Hawke's Bay reporter Anusha Bradley has followed the 5-day trial and filed this report.
It took the jury of 7 women and 5 men 3.5 hours to find Hami Hanara guilty of murder. A dozen of his family members wept in the public gallery as the verdict was read out. A large number of Kelly Donna's family also sat through the week-long trial. His cousin, Damon Donna, said the family were pleased with the murder conviction.
Oh, he was a good fella, and yeah, at the end of the day, no matter what the sentence, can't bring our cousin back, and it's good that it's been foreclosed, and yeah, the family can move forward. Yeah, he was a good man, and yeah, it's pretty sad, but yeah, at least everything's finished.
Hanara's uncle, Tony Ratahi, and family friend Fiona says Mr Donna's death was an unspeakable tragedy.
For him, for his loved ones, for the whole community, and for this poor young boy who's had the odds stacked against him from the very beginning.
And it was a case of in the wrong place at the wrong time.
And the wrong reactions to the wrong circumstances.
And the wrong reactions to the wrong circumstances.
It all started when the teenager and 4 friends came across Kelly Donna behind the Flax Bar and Eatery in March. They borrowed his torch, and when they didn't give it back, a fight broke out. Just after 10:30 that Sunday night in March, Mr Donna bled to death after a major artery in his neck was severed. CCTV footage presented to the jury showed Hanara holding a knife just seconds before Mr Donna was stabbed. 33 seconds later, he comes back into the frame holding a bloodied knife. Summing up the case this morning, Crown Prosecutor Steve Manning told the jury that based on that footage alone, there was no doubt Hanara was the killer.
As a matter of logic and reasoning, it's appropriate for you to draw an inference. Just on those bare facts alone, you can draw an inference that it was the defendant that stabbed Mr Donna.
And he said Hanara had murderous intent.
The choice for you members of the jury is, what was he thinking at the time he took that knife, not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 times, and chose to plunge it into the body of another human being.
Hanara's lawyer, Eric Forster, had argued 3 eyewitnesses presented by the Crown gave contradictory accounts, and there was no real evidence that the teenager stabbed Mr Donna. He urged the jury to deliver a not guilty verdict.
That 30 seconds when all the youths are off screen, a lot could have happened in that time. It was a violent melee, it was chaotic.
Kelly Donna's family, who had travelled from Opotiki and Ngaruawahia for the trial, says he will be remembered as a good man. Hanara will be sentenced on February 5th. At the High Court in Napier for Checkpoint, Anusha Bradley.
Returning now to secondary teachers who have voted to strike in the first term of next year after rejecting a pay offer from the government. The PPTA has asked for a single increase of 15%, and in response, the government offered its members a 3% pay increase for 3 consecutive years. The PPTA's president, Jack Boyle, says teachers voted overwhelmingly to reject the current offer, and he joins me now. Hi Jack, can you tell us what was the split? How many voted? What percentage voted for strike action?
Kia ora. We don't release the actual numbers, that's private to members, but I can tell you it was an overwhelming and almost unanimous majority who have said, look, the current offer is so far away from what we know we need and what kids deserve that it has to be rejected. And also they've given authority for the use of industrial action in term 1 of 2019, not because we want to. Teachers never want to make moves that will impact the learning and the well-being of young people, but because we cannot have a business-as-usual approach to negotiations.
So
there are already too many children missing out, so what we want is we want to continue to bargain in good faith, but we can't just go through the motions of having the lowest common denominator, which inches up slowly and painfully over time, because that is not only going to not fix the situation that we have, it's going to make it worse.
All right, we'll get to some of the details of what exactly you want in a minute, but to begin with, can you tell us what form that strike action will take? Will there be rolling strikes?
No, because so at the moment we've been given authority for a one-day stoppage in term one, and also we've been given authority to develop a wider campaign plan, which might include things like community engagement. So that's going to come from the secondary teachers of New Zealand. They'll come up with what they think they need to go out to the community to get those messages around what we know we need to bring out the brightest and best.
Are you going to join forces with the primary teachers to maximise the impact and go out all together for a one-day stoppage?
Yeah, look, at the moment, it's my understanding the primary teachers have an offer in front of them and they're conducting a ballot around whether to accept or reject that. But certainly, we had a press conference last Friday and we've got a shared interest to do the best for kids. And if it happens that they reject the current offer and they also look to use an industrial response, because between now and then there is insufficient leeway given by the government in their current sort of no more money position, and there's insufficient success to be able to recruit, support and retain teachers through that negotiation, then that's absolutely on the cards.
Right, so it's on the table, a super strike, if you like, with teachers from primary and secondary. OK, so this offer from the government that you've rejected, it's worth more than $400 million over 4 years, and it is a cumulative 9.3% increase over those 3 years for all teachers. I mean, for a lot of people, that is a gold standard offer. What more do you want specifically?
Well, I guess you've got to ask the people of New Zealand, do they want highly trained, motivated, qualified teachers guiding the learning of their children? And if the answer is yes, then you need to actually look at the relative pay that you get for going into education, which is a really important job, versus other career choices. Because what we're seeing is 40% fewer people are choosing education than they were 10 years ago. What we're seeing is that 40% of those who do choose it are gone inside the first 5 years. And what we're seeing is that 1 in 5 workers in secondary schools...
Look, I understand your argument. I understand your argument, and people do as well. But I'm asking you, what is the price tag for those highly motivated, highly qualified teachers that you're talking about? If it's not a 9.3% cumulative increase over 3 years, what is the number?
So the number that we've gone into bargaining with is 15%, and that 15% is what we need to re-establish the relativity to the median wage that we had in the early 2000s, which was the last time that we managed to push back significant shortages that were impacting the learning of our young people.
Nobody gets 15% though. Nobody gets 15%. So what's your next best offer? If you're expecting counter offers from the ministry, surely there needs to be a bit of movement on your side.
There will be, and that's what good faith negotiation is. But at the moment, all I have in front of me, and all the secondary teachers of New Zealand have in front of them, is an offer that is 3 by 3 by 3 over 3 years. And we know, because there's been a resounding rejection from secondary teachers, that is insufficient. So absolutely, we are committed to working through negotiations from now all the way through until the beginning of next term, if that's what's required, in order to come up with something that we can take out and that our members will say, that secondary teachers will say, yep, this is enough to keep me in doing what I love and what I want to be doing, and enough for the brightest and best who are currently in tertiary education to choose education.
The Education Minister, Chris Hipkins, has said 15% is, quote, out of the ballpark. So who would you like him to take the money off so that you can get 15%? Which other occupation?
Yeah, that's the business of government, and you won't find too many governments that will say, yep, we've got plenty of money, just fill your boots. Absolutely, the government will have to prioritise from within the amount of money that they've got, whether it's the $5.5 billion surplus or whether it is what they've put aside for vote education. That is their job. And what we are asking the government to do is to work with us so that we can have great teachers in New Zealand, so that we can train them here, so that it is seen as an attractive or first-choice career option for New Zealanders, And at the moment, we're too far away from that.
Thank you for joining us this evening. That is Jack Boyle, who is with the Post-Primary Teachers Association. As he said there, they have voted to take industrial action in the first term of next year, and at this stage it will be a one-day stoppage, reserving the right to go out with the primary school teachers at the same time if they haven't sorted their pay claim. And we invited the Minister of Education, Chris Hipkins, on Checkpoint tonight. He was unavailable. Alcohol-fuelled abuse and assaults are just some of the antisocial behaviour that Canterbury Rugby League says is making its sidelines unsafe. It's calling on the Christchurch City Council to ban booze at 20 parks across the city, saying that 70% of its clubs are dealing with alcohol-related issues on a weekly basis. Katie Todd reports.
Cracking open a cold one at the league is all part of the experience for many fans, but Canterbury Rugby League says it's time to confine drinking to the club rooms. Its capability manager, George Lapel, wants Christchurch City Council to slap an alcohol ban on 20 Christchurch parks during league season between March and September.
At the moment, under council bylaws, any member of the public has the ability to consume alcohol on council grounds, and if an issue arises from a general person coming in and watching a game of rugby league, as an example, our club members or our club delegates have no authority to ask them to leave.
Some Christchurch League clubs have seen people leave the sport because of what they've experienced on the sidelines. Mr Lapel says this year alone, Canterbury Rugby League has seen people drinking at junior games, abusing spectators and officials, and threatening people with weapons.
Arguments between spectators, abuse directed at match officials, people who are refereeing games, disputes between local community people and club members. And what we're saying is that we don't want to be in a situation where any of those types of positions occur that can result in any form of violence or anything that goes beyond people enjoying the sport.
2 of Canterbury Rugby League's 16 clubs have tried implementing their own no alcohol policies on the sidelines. The Celebration Lions have had a booze ban in place at their park since 2004, but club secretary Jazz Wynyard says it isn't always easy to police.
It is quite hard to, if you're a club, to go up to people and say, can you not drink at this park? If it's a rule, well then people will more likely listen to it rather than coming from just someone who's part of a club.
Jazz Wynyard says alcohol-related issues haven't done much for Rugby League's reputation.
Rugby league already known as a grubby sport, it's just adding to the fuel.
And she says a council-imposed booze ban could help make the sport family-friendly again. Sir Peter Leach, aka the Mad Butcher, supports Canterbury Rugby League's move. While Auckland's biggest rugby league fan says he's seen few alcohol-related incidents over the decades he's been watching, he'd certainly like to see the sidelines made booze-free.
I would prefer no drinking on the sideline at local games. Never been a fan of that, you know what I mean? But in controlled environments like within the club, and that, not a problem. I've been a rugby league fan for over 50 years in my club, Mangere East. We've never had a problem in the club with alcohol.
Christchurch councillors are considering Canterbury Rugby League's submission and will undertake further consultation before reporting back to council. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, call Katie Todd, 10A.
The son of All Blacks legend Sir Michael Jones is staying in Auckland to play his provincial rugby. A rising star who recently captained St Peter's College to the National Secondary Schools title, Nico Jones announced today he had turned down an offer from Canterbury and the Crusaders to sign a 2-year deal to stay in Auckland instead. Jones, who has not long completed his exams after his final year of school, was also recently named as a surprise inclusion in the New Zealand men's sevens team for their 2019 season. The 18-year-old spoke to media earlier today, and here's what he had to say when he was asked what it's like being the son of one of this country's greatest rugby players.
It's a privilege, and I think I've said it not because he's an All Black, but because he's a great dad, and he's he's loving, he's supportive, and in every way he's helped me just to grow as a man and also as a rugby player. And he can be hard on me, but I know he's always for the best of me, and he will point out when I've done bad, but he'll point out when I've done good, and yeah, it's been good. There's can be pressure, and people always talk about it, but I guess it's just what it is, and I just have to take it just keep and run with it. So yeah, and yeah, I can't say I didn't want it because I'm just thankful that he's my dad and he's been as good as he is to me.
And that was 18-year-old Nico Jones, who has signed a 2-year deal to play rugby for Auckland. Our sports reporter Clay Wilson is here to talk about Nico and other sporting matters. That was gorgeous, wasn't it? It gave his father such big ups there. And what else can you tell us about his decision to stay in Auckland?
Well, it was a decision he didn't make lightly because there was a lot of interest in him. He is one of the hottest young prospects in New Zealand rugby, really. He was a star of this year's schoolboys competition, captained St Peter's College to the 2018 schoolboys title. Also worth noting, he's a lot like his father, as people would have seen who watched that video. Quite stocky, very fast, but a very powerfully built player as well. So because of how talented he is, he was chased quite heavily by a number of unions, turned down a very good offer from Canterbury, ultimately decided to stay here in Auckland, probably for 2 reasons. The first is that, as you mentioned in your intro there, he's made the New Zealand men's sevens team. Now, they're now based in Mount Maunganui, so I guess it made sense to him to stay in this part of the country for this initial part of his provincial career. You also can't help but think that for sentimental value, playing for not only his home province, but also for the province that his dad played for so long. Played 15 years for Michael Jones for Auckland, as well as 55 tests for the All Blacks. So some sentimental value in deciding to play his first years of provincial rugby here in Auckland.
And listening to him talk, you can tell that family is really important to him.
Yes, certainly, yeah.
Yeah, let's stay with rugby. All Blacks, final test against Italy in Rome on Sunday, but what? Interest in the game not as high as interest in some peripheral matters?
Yeah, that's fair to say. They're obviously trying to bounce back from that defeat to Ireland last weekend. That was an upset, but it would really be a massive boil over if they lost to Italy in Rome this weekend. So for that reason, it's reflected in selection. We've got 11 changes in the starting 15, a number of what you would probably call second-string players playing in the 23 for the All Blacks. So for that reason, this week there's been more interest on the likes of Kieran Reid, his form, which Steve Hanson's come out this week and said, he's not really that worried about it. His position as captain is not under threat. And also on the coaching situation with Hanson himself, who's going to make a decision, he says, before Christmas about his future beyond the 2019 World Cup. And also Ireland coach Joe Schmidt. Now, for those that don't know, Joe Schmidt is a New Zealander himself.
Yeah.
Obviously had a lot of success with Ireland. He's taken them from 8th in the world rankings in 2013 to now to 2nd. 2 wins over the All Blacks in the last 2 years, so no mean feat. If he does come back here, he's touted to be one of the favourites to take over from Hanson when he steps down. So a lot of interest from not only Ireland if he's going to stay, but also New Zealand if he's going to come back and put his hat in the ring to be the next All Blacks coach.
Don't want to put you on the spot, but if you were a betting man, what do you reckon?
It sounds to me like he's going to stay in Ireland. He's been there for a number of years now. He coached club rugby there before he coached the Irish national team. So it does sound like he's going to stay, but you never know. The lure of the All Blacks is very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Motorsport now. The all-Kiwi battle for the Supercars title already underway across the ditch.
Yeah, it's the final round of the Supercars season. We've already had the first practice session this afternoon in Newcastle on the New South Wales coast. Second practice session just finishing up now, I think. So as you say, 2 Kiwis fighting for the title. We've got Scott McLaughlin, but he's just 14 points ahead of Shane Van Gisbergen. So in Supercars speak, it's very close. It's actually the closest margin since this current point system was introduced 10 years ago. So we've got Van Gisbergen. He's won a title in 2016. McLaughlin, motorsport fans will remember well, came very close last year. Ended up finishing 2nd. So there's a lot in it for both of them. 2 races, one tomorrow and one on Sunday. So yeah, going to be very close and very entertaining for Kiwi fans of Supercars.
And for others who want to stay on the couch and glued to the television screen or listening to the radio, what is on offer in terms of sports over the weekend?
Yeah, it seems a bit strange to put these sort of towards the back, but we've got the second cricket test in New Zealand, obviously coming off a thrilling win against Pakistan in that first test. So that starts tomorrow night in Dubai. New Zealand leading the 3-match series 1-0. Then we've also got 2 lots of women's football teams playing overseas, most notably the under-17 women's team at their World Cup in Uruguay. They're through to the quarterfinals and bidding to become the first New Zealand team to make it beyond getting past their group stage and then getting out of that stage. So the third stage of a football World Cup. And we also have the football ferns, the national women's team. They're playing the Oceania Nations Cup. Now this is important because the winner of this tournament qualifies for next year's World Cup in France. And the Football Ferns have won every edition of this tournament, so favourites to do so again.
So order in and hunker down.
Yeah, definitely. Get on the couch.
Thank you. That is Clay Wilson with all you need to know about what's happening in sport over the weekend. Now, we've got some feedback here from you, which we'll get to, about the teachers' strike. This person says a strike in January is not enough. They say they should go on strike, the teachers they mean, from a week before Christmas until early February, 6 weeks or so, just to make their point, says Helen. I think Helen's being a little bit tongue-in-cheek with that. It is a nice story on the reopened Kaikoura rail line, this person says, but unfortunately the Coastal Pacific route is too expensive, they say, for regular Kiwis. And it is a pity when our taxpayer dollars no doubt contributed to its repair. Some comment on this might be good. Actually, I'd be interested to know how much those tickets are. If someone could let us know, that would be great. You can text us on 2101 on the text, or we're at checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. So let us know, curious. Someone here is saying that way too expensive for regular Kiwis to ride. And this one says there is a luxury new carriage, marvellous, they say. How about a second-class carriage, which non-tourists can afford? Again, could you please query the government, they say, in respect of that. So really interested to know, do let us know what the price of a ticket is, because I'm not sure about that, and really relevant to our conversation. We will be talking about the Central Rail link in Auckland after the news.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening, I'm Paul Brennan. Secondary teachers have voted to strike in the first term of next year after rejecting a pay offer from the government. The Post-Primary Teachers Association had asked for a single increase of 15%, and in response the government offered its members a 3% pay increase for 3 consecutive years. The PPTA's president, Jack Boyle, says teachers have voted overwhelmingly to reject the current offer. He says the sector faces unprecedented teacher shortages and it's becoming harder to attract people into teaching.
All the drivers of teacher shortage are connected. And if we want a society where every child gets the time and energy that they need from their teachers in order to reach their full potential, then we must do the right thing now. We can't wait another 9 years. A complete correction, a reset is needed.
The PPTA President, Jack Boyle. The Education Minister, Chris Hipkins, says bargaining with the Secondary Teachers Union is not as advanced as with primary teachers, and more talks with the PPTA are scheduled next week. The Minister of Transport, Phil Twyford, has ordered a review of the Transport Agency after revelations it's been failing to properly enforce safety rules in many inspection areas, including car warrants of fitness. The agency has admitted knowing for years that a mechanic in Dargaville was not doing proper checks and only clamped down after a fatal car crash. Ruth Hill reports.
Phil Twyford says he has been seriously concerned about the scope and seriousness of the failures that have occurred. He says there are several matters that need to be addressed to reassure him and the public that the problems have been fixed. He says the law firm Meredith Connell, appointed by NZTA's board to investigate the backlog of checks on people carrying out warrants of fitness, is making good progress. But given the information that has come to light this week, he's formally instructed the Ministry of Transport to review the agency's regulatory functions. The review is due to be completed by the end of March next year. Ko Ruth Hill tēnei.
The husband of a Wellington woman found dead on a Wairarapa beach has thanked the people who helped search for his wife. Sonam Scheller, who was 5 months pregnant, went missing from her home in the suburb of Kandala on Saturday. Her body was found by a group of surfers on Wednesday at White Rock Beach, about 35 kilometres from Martinborough. Sega Scheller says he wants to thank the police, media, surfers and residents who helped during the search. He says he won't be making any further comment until the police release the results of their investigation. The family of a 14-year-old boy convicted of murdering a Hawke's Bay man, Kelly Donner, says his death is a tragedy for all. Hami Hanada has been found guilty of murder after a 5-day trial at the High Court in Napier. He fatally stabbed Mr. Donner in March in a fight following an argument over a torch. Speaking outside the court after the verdict, Hanada's family said his death is an unspeakable tragedy.
For him, for his loved ones, for the whole community, and for this poor young boy who's had the odds stacked against him from the very beginning.
And it's a case of in the wrong place at the wrong time.
And the wrong reactions to the wrong circumstances.
And the wrong reactions to the wrong circumstances.
Hami Hanada's family members speaking outside the High Court in Napier following his murder conviction. The wife of a man who died in a truck crash says she is thrilled the inquest into the death is being reopened. The 2013 crash was the subject of an inquest 3 years ago which failed to get to the bottom of why the accident happened. Colin Young reports.
An inquest was unable to decide what caused the truck to flip on its side. The crash happened on a moderate bend near Waikoikoi in South Otago, killing the driver Wayne Brentzel and his passenger Toby Waitokia. Since then, Mr. Brentzel's wife has fought to have the inquest reopened. Shona Brentzel says she doesn't want to say anything that might jeopardise the second inquest, but did say she was glad there would now be an opportunity for the truth to come out. The police say the Solicitor General directed a further coronial inquiry after a police review of the initial investigation, which was prompted by the family's concerns. Ko Conan Young Tēnei.
A public transport lobby group hopes the City Rail link will still go ahead on time despite the parent company of one of its contractors being put into administration. RCR Infrastructure New Zealand was jointly awarded one of 7 contracts for the country's largest ever transport project 6 weeks ago. But last night, its Australian parent company, RCR Tomlinson, went into administration. New Zealand Transport 2050 Chair Paul Miller says it's a worrying development.
I was pretty disappointed, but it's unfortunately part of the industry at the moment in both countries. There's potential risk impacting the project itself. They did mention, of course, that the New Zealand business unit was separate. It's hard to know when they say it's separate, is it actually a profitable business unit?
Paul Miller. It's 5 minutes past 6. Now, sport. New Zealand driver Scott McLaughlin hasn't watched the disastrous end to his 2017 supercars season, but believes he'll be better because of it. In this weekend's final round in Newcastle in Australia, McLaughlin went into last year's final race with a 78-point lead and within reach of his maiden title. However, he was hit with 3 race penalties, including one after the race, which handed the title to Jamie Whincup. The 25-year-old Ford driver is in a similar position this weekend, holding a 14-point lead over fellow New Zealander Shane van Gisbergen. But McLaughlin's pre-race preparation hasn't included a full viewing of last year's finale.
I don't need to watch it. I know what happened, and it's just one of those things. I just got on with it, and I've looked at a lot of footage and a lot of in-car footage from the Sunday race because I made a lot of passes there. So it definitely is something to learn from and where we were strong. But yeah, the race itself, no, I haven't watched it.
Scott McLaughlin was 15th fastest in today's first practice session, while Van Gisbergen was 2nd fastest. Australia will play England in the final of the Women's T20 Cricket World Cup in the Caribbean. Australia beat hosts the West Indies by 71 runs in the first semi-final, while England had an 8-wicket win over India in the other. The Breakers play competition leaders the Perth Wildcats in Auckland tonight in the national basketball competition. The 5th-placed Breakers have won just 4 of their 9 games so far this season, while Perth has lost just 1. And that's the news.
Tomorrow morning, how individualised can cancer treatment get? That's the exciting area of research right now. Dr. Geoffrey Ross on molecular diagnostics. Mary Robinson was Ireland's first female president and was responsible for leading the very conservative country to reassess its opposition to birth control, homosexuality. Now she's campaigning to save the planet from climate change. And Roseanne Cash, who has a new album. Join me, Kim Hill, tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. The short forecast now through to midnight tomorrow, Saturday. Northland rain gradually spreading south today with heavy falls and possible thunderstorms tomorrow. Auckland to Kapiti, including Coromandel Bay of Plenty in the central high country. Mainly fine today. Rain at times tomorrow. Possible heavy falls from Waitomo and Taupo northwards. Gisborne to Wairarapa, also Wellington. Cloudy periods with a few showers turning to rain for a time later tomorrow. Marlborough, Canterbury and North Otago, often cloudy, patchy drizzle turns to rain tomorrow. For the rest of the South Island, fine today, apart from isolated afternoon and evening showers about the ranges. Early fog in Southland tomorrow, otherwise occasional rain developing during the day. At the Chathams, cloudy periods today, occasional rain tomorrow. It's nearly 8 minutes past 6.
And you're listening to Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. The parent company of the engineering firm set to build New Zealand's largest ever infrastructure project has gone bust just 6 weeks after being awarded the contract. RCR Infrastructure New Zealand was jointly awarded one of 7 contracts for the $3.4 billion City Rail link. But last night, its Australian parent company, RCR Tomlinson, went into administration. The CEO of City Rail Limited, Shona Sean Sweeney has met with the receivers this afternoon and joins me now. Mr. Sweeney, can you give us an update? What have the receivers been able to tell you?
Good evening. The receivers have been able to tell us that they are going through a process of looking at the parts of the RCR business that are profitable, and they're looking to run potential sale processes for those parts of the business. They've confirmed to us that they view that the rail business is a profitable business, and they have strong expectations that they should be able to sell that part of the business off. But that's a process they've just started.
Okay, so what if they can't sell the business and you've got a contract with them?
Well, we've got a contract with them to do a design. It's a $7.5 million piece of design, which will run out sometime around March next year. So that contract is profitable for the receiver as well. And we had a discussion with them about their enthusiasm for supporting that contract. And they've indicated that they are supportive of supporting that contract at this point in time. So we're just going to work with them and see where that takes us.
The vital words there, I think, are at this point in time. So could the situation change?
Everything could change, Lisa, but that's what we're working with at the moment.
And so you can't guarantee 100% that you'll be going ahead with this project with this company if anything could change at any time?
I'd just like to say that this is a relatively small part of the overall CRL project.
But it's a vital part, though, isn't it? It might be small, but it is absolutely mission critical.
Yeah, and every indication we have at the moment is they are likely to be able to complete that work.
But likely and might change. That makes people nervous when they're paying big money for things. Doesn't it make you nervous?
That's the world we live in.
Have we paid any money to this company already?
Yes, and they've done a lot of work for us. So we're very happy with that.
Okay, so is it going to cost us any more, this situation?
No.
Are you sure about that?
Are you talking about will we pay them more money?
Yeah, if the company is sold off, is there potential for the contract to change and the cost to increase?
No, we have a contract with them to do this work for that money. So
okay.
We're reasonably comfortable with that.
We're in a slightly unknown situation here, and people will be wondering how we got into it. So who did the due diligence on this company before it was awarded the contract in October? Because it has had financial issues that predate the signing of this contract. Who was responsible for the due diligence, and was it done properly?
We did, and we believe we did it properly. The same due diligence was done in Australia by their banks, and they saw fit to increase their lending facilities to them at the same time. And the financial markets saw fit to invest another $100 million in them at the same time. And they went through pretty severe due diligence to get to that point. So we did a lot of work to assess where they were at. And I think the combined view that we had, the banks and the market in general, was that they had identified what their problem was and they had addressed it. Now, unfortunately, that's not turned out to be the case, but at that point in time, we felt there'd been significant due diligence done on them.
Are you going to go back and review that decision and make sure your processes were correct? We're very happy with the decision we made. We talked about it a bit today.
How
can you be happy with the decision you made where you're now in a situation with a company, you have a contract with a company whose parent company is going down the gurgler, and you can't be 100% sure that nothing is going to change with this or whether it's going to cost you any more?
In construction, there is no such thing as a sure thing. Companies go through various stages of being under some strain and stress. And I mean, if you look around the New Zealand construction industry at the moment, there's a number of companies that have gone through difficult times. That's basically part of the environment we have to work in, and we have to make assessments based on what we know. And we were very comfortable with, based on what we knew, what was the right decision. Now, that hasn't turned out to be so, and we'll just deal with that.
Hey, Mr. Sweeney, before you go, when did you get a first whiff that something was not right here?
They went into another trading halt about 2 weeks ago.
And did you start asking questions then?
Yes.
Did you get truthful answers?
I was speaking to their Australian CEO about every 3 days. He was heavily restricted in what he could tell me because he is under quite a lot of restrictions about the information he'd be putting out into the market. But he was giving me an update to the best he could as to how things were going. And we took a view sometime earlier that this was the likely thing that was going to happen, and we were planning for it when it actually happened.
So you knew this was coming, but you didn't say anything publicly until the company went into liquidation or overnight.
We took a view that it would be very prudent for us to plan for this eventuality, but it wouldn't have been right for us to say it to anyone.
All right, thank you for joining us this evening. That is Sean Sweeney, who's the CEO of the City Rail Link, talking there about the fact that one of these companies that they have a contract with, the parent company in Australia, has gone into administration. The police are appealing for the public's help for more clues as to how the body of a pregnant Wellington woman ended up on a remote Wairarapa beach when her 2 cell phones were found in the water at Island Bay. They're asking for any CCTV footage from the Wellington suburb of Kandala, where Sanam Shalar lived, and to look out for anything she might have been wearing or carrying at the time she went missing. Our reporter, Laura Dooney, has been at the White Rock Beach in Wairarapa.
I'm on the south coast of Wairarapa, near where the body of Mrs. Shalar was found. I'm not able to access the site, but I'm told it was very rugged, very remote, and it's a rocky shore. A rahui has been placed on the site and the area has been blessed by local iwi on behalf of her and her family. Detective Senior Sergeant Warwick McKee addressed media earlier today and he said they're pleading for anyone who saw Mrs. Shalar either in Island Bay, Kandala or the Wairarapa on Friday the 16th or Saturday the 17th of November to get in touch. He says her 2 cell phones were found by members of the public in the water at Island Bay, and police are taking a closer look at those to see what information they can get.
That's our reporter Laura Dooney. Be warned, this one's not really polite dinner conversation, but it's important, so here we go. Human poo and sanitary pads have been spilling into a popular West Auckland creek, but it wasn't Waste Care who discovered the leak caused by a major rupture of a wastewater pipe. It was a local kayaker. Locals say hundreds of people swim and kayak in the Henderson Creek in Te Atatu, and Water Care needs to do a better job of monitoring it. Jessie Chang went there to investigate.
Getting in the same way as Chris did.
It's low tide at Henderson Creek as I make my way into a kayak and out onto the water. Russell Kavanagh is a local kayaker and he's taking me to see the ruptured pipe. He's the one who discovered it leaking late last month and he says it was disgusting.
It just smelled just purely like an open sewer. I could see floating turds, I could see floating sanitary napkins, I could see fish eating the turds, even some birds were eating the turds. There's no nice way of putting it. It was just straight out raw sewage.
As we get closer to the spill, I get a sniff of what he means.
Oh, that smells pretty nasty.
And although there's no raw sewage leaking into the river now, it's left a mark. Dozens of sanitary pads are stuck onto the banks, turned muddy and brown. Russell Kavanagh reported the leak to Water Care the day after he found it, but he has no idea how long the pipe had been broken.
I just have to stick to the facts. I could see the raw sewage pouring into the creek on the 25th. And as I said earlier, I've gone kayaking and come out of the water with a brown stain on the kayak and seen brown trails of whatever that smelt like sewage on the water. But we really didn't know if it was a sediment or if it was a one-off event.
Chris Ballantyne has lived on the Te Atatu Peninsula for the last 20 years. He's worried that if it wasn't for Mr Kavanagh, hundreds of people would have still been using the creek.
You could come down to the Taipari Strand here any weekend and see dogs in the water, people water skiing, kayaks, people sailing, kids swimming. The river is alive and everyone was completely unaware of what was a major pipe rupture, and for us I think that's the major breakdown.
In a statement, Watercare said it was able to channel most of the wastewater flow into another pipe, but it recently discovered more sewage being discharged into the creek. Watercare said that was repaired last Saturday. It's apologised to users of the creek. Chris Ballantyne says the community wants to work with Watercare to keep the waterways clean, but the organisation has to be more upfront.
Sometimes I fear there's some PR spin that comes out, and we just want to understand what the situation is. We understand that there's been decades of underinvestment in infrastructure. We've got a growing population. We understand that, but we want to know what's happening, what the plan is, and when it's going to be delivered, and whether there's a risk to our community, and what we can do as a community to help.
The warning signs at the creek say people should stay out of the water until the end of December, or until the signs are removed. Mr Ballantyne says locals are forming a river care group to try and tackle the sewage overflow problem. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi nei, Cordesi Chang tēnei.
A youth group in the Auckland suburb of Glen Innes is using kapa haka to bring its community together after a decade of turbulent changes. Glen Innes has gone from a suburb full of state houses to one where the median house price sits above $1 million. And the youth group Te Ami Orangi has organised the Kotuku Festival tomorrow as a way of ensuring that rangatahi still know their place in the community. Eden Moore reports.
As Te Ami Orangi youth group leader Jordan Makia strums his guitar, students at Glenbrae School in Glen Innes quickly switch into kapahaka mode. Glen Innes has been through intensive redevelopment in the last decade. Modern townhouses now suffocate a landscape where quarter-acre state houses once stood. And it's a change Jordan Makia says GI rangatahi are still coming to grips with.
It can change their mindset, as in being confused and not knowing what's going on in the community, not seeing familiar faces anymore because of the families being moved out. So our rangatahi are starting to kind of drift away from community events.
The Te Ami Orangi youth group, which is run from Ruapōtaka Marae, works to engage with local youth. Late last year, the community dealt with 6 suspected suicides in the space of 4 months.
That's a huge point to why Te Ami Orangi exists, is around suicide prevention. So maybe one way we can help them cope with it is through dance and singing, in this case kapahaka.
The Kotuku Festival is the first kapahaka gathering the group has organised and is being led by 25 youth leaders. Glenbrae School is one of 15 local schools that have been practising for the festival for the last 2 months. And tomorrow can't come soon enough for student Matthew Tukuafu.
I feel very hyped because can't wait to do this Māori, haka and stuff.
What do you feel like when you do the haka?
I feel like I'm in the heavens. And like the ancestors that were passed away.
His friend Sioneli Sala's adrenaline is also pumping for the performance.
I feel hyped too. I can't wait for the haka song because we practice hard so we can do it.
And Sione and Matthew both say Jordan Makia has been their biggest supporter.
Oh my God, they're really nice. They work good all the time. They doesn't want something bad to go with it. Yeah. And they always say, "Go Hundies!"
Go Hundies! But Jordan says it's all worthwhile.
For me, it's cool to see our rangatahi getting involved with this because when they start growing up, they can really see what life has to offer for them. Hopefully, they can, in return, come back to where they started from, which is GI.
Kotuku Festival will be held at Ruapōtaka Marae tomorrow. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi pōnei, ko Eden Moreahau.
The trucking industry is being accused of competing for big contracts at the expense of their staff and road safety. The Truck Drivers Union is warning the companies are competing for tenders by forcing drivers to accept low pay rates and long work hours. Emma Hatton reports.
Graham Trusk has driven trucks for 34 years. The Wellington driver says it's a good job, so long as you stand up for yourself.
There is a lot of bullying going on in this particular industry, and they basically, some instances where dispatchers or managers are saying, well, if you don't like the job, bugger off, go somewhere else.
He says he doesn't bow to pressure to work long hours, but knows many don't have that luxury.
They don't want to cause a fuss, and if they do, they think, oh, well, my job might be on the line. They can't afford to because they probably put themselves in a situation where they've got a mortgage, a family to provide for, and they don't want to lose their job.
Jared Abbott from First Union says working 70 hours, the maximum allowed for truck drivers, has become the new standard working week. He says that's too much, and some drivers do even more, fudging logbooks to get the job done.
We see it a lot where people are pushed to break the logbook rules or to breach health and safety in some way. They're scared, rightfully so, for their livelihoods to ever test it. And we see it a lot with quite reputable companies where people do test it, they basically get shafted.
Police figures show in the year to June 2018, nearly 3,000 logbook or work time offences were recorded, and almost 7,000 speeding tickets were issued. Driver behaviour offences, including dangerous and reckless driving, were clocked at just over 3,000. That figure doubled from 5 years ago. Mr Abbott says a lot of that's to do with pressure on drivers to complete long runs in short times, often operating on minimal sleep. He says the root cause of all this has a lot to do with the contract the firm holds and the promise to complete the job at a low price.
It's competitive things by any company being able to come into the industry, undercut good-paying companies by employing drivers willing to work for less, whether they're less experienced or migrants, which drives wages down in general and make it hard for good employers to be able to win contracts.
Ken Shirley of the Road Transport Forum, which represents the interests of the road transport industry, says some of it comes down to regulation. He says without it, firms will progressively cut corners and will end up competing unfairly through non-compliance. Mr Shirley says overloading, speeding and breaching the work time rule are all serious road safety issues, but they also have a commercial impact on the vast majority of operators who are compliant.
They effectively subsidise the ones who cut the corners because they are winning contracts unfairly by taking shortcuts, and that's unacceptable.
But getting drivers to blow the whistle is tough. RNZ spoke to a number, more than happy to share their gripes off the record, but would not put their name or their voice to the public for fear of losing their jobs. Graham Trusk says having an industry standard which set a baseline remuneration depending on what class of licence is held would be a practical first step in making the industry fairer. He says trucking used to be an industry workers were proud to be in, and it's an industry he enjoys. But he sees the gaps and says until something changes, he wouldn't recommend it to anyone. For Checkpoint, Emma Hatton.
And you can hear more about the pressures facing truck drivers on Insight just after the 8 o'clock news on Sunday morning. South Islanders are celebrating the reopening of the Coastal Pacific Rail Line, which was wrecked by the 2016 Kaikoura earthquake. The line connects Christchurch and Picton, and before the quake, ferried about 42,000 people a year into Marlborough and Kaikoura. Alongside today's celebration, the government announced it would invest $40 million to put new 2 carriages onto the line. Katie Doyle reports.
For the first time since 2016, a passenger train left the Picton railway station this morning destined for Christchurch, with a load of VIPs on board, including the Prime Minister, tourism chiefs, rail workers, iwi and Kaikoura locals. The line was destroyed in the Kaikoura earthquake, with more than 750 separate sections needing repair. It took more than 1,700 workers to fix the damage, in what Kiwi Rail is calling the biggest rebuild effort in half a century. Director of the Coastal Pacific Rail Line rebuild, Walter Rushbrook, was on board.
I just felt really proud of the team, and when I say the team, it's not just the people that were on the ground. It was the people back in our home offices. It was government officials who helped us out with funding and processes and providing the right resources that we needed, right the way through to the communities that put up with us working away.
Before the quake, the Coastal Pacific Rail Line ferried about 42,000 people a year into Marlborough and Kaikoura. They spent an estimated $34 million across the two regions, supporting 300 local jobs. Winston Gray says his town thrives off tourism, so having the train line back is a huge benefit.
That train's going to run, 12 months of the year. They made that announcement today, so that is good. A lot of people get off that train, stay the night, and they sort of stay a night and get back on and things like that. So it's just another boost for our tourism. Tourism drives our economy here now. It's a big part. Very big part of our economy. We've got farming and fishing, etc., but tourism is a big part of the economy.
Alongside today's celebration was a government announcement that it would be investing $40 million to put 2 new carriages onto the line. One carriage would hold 63 passengers during peak season, while the other would be a luxury premium carriage equipped with high-quality food and drink. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says the new services are going to boost tourism and employment rates.
The improved service is expected out till about 2027. The expectation is that passenger numbers will boost to about 85,000 and will support the creation of roughly 400 new jobs in the region.
Kiwi Rail says it is now looking at upgrading its reservation systems and international marketing for the new premium service. For Checkpoint, Katie Doyle.
And some of you were asking about the price of that rail trip, and one texter has told us that the cost of Picton to Christchurch ranges between $100 and $200 one way for an adult. And also we are hearing, I have a breaking news alert here from NZTA that I've just been handed. The New Zealand Transport Agency has immediately suspended Westland Mechanical and Tyre Limited is trading as Westland Automotive and Tyre, so they've had their licence suspended as an investigating organisation. This is obviously for the issue of warrant of fitnesses. Apologies, I'm just seeing this for the first time myself. The Auckland-based business, sole director and shareholder, Mr. Akram Zakiri, has also been immediately suspended as a vehicle inspector. The suspension notices were served on Friday afternoon, November 23rd, that's today. This is following concerns about his failure to check some aspects of vehicles during warrant of fitnesses assessments such as brakes, seat belts, steering and exhaust systems.